Ernest more, but, like, nigga, one with
This nigga so quiet.
bro, nigga, I ain't gonna lie. Bro, I, like, think I do it at the same time I don't, nigga. Bro's confused, I'm playing later, nigga, but look, yeah. Then how long do you have, nigga?
Mike was fucking tweaking.
Okay, bro, I mean, then I think I gotta have a conversation with Ernest and you, nigga. Like,
Yeah, Mark,
I
you
think
and
I have
I
a
can.
conversation with Ernest.
Yeah, what
Yeah.
topic?
What, nigga? Nigga, I'm just saying I can have a conversation with Ernest and then you, nigga. Because if you gotta leave immediately, then sure, but, like, I mean, nigga, I just, like, would rather have a talk with Ernest. Okay, Ernest, what topics?
We're arguing. We can do theism, we can do abortion, or we can do semantic.
I should be on semantic externalism.
What was that? Say that again. You raise it.
Wait, hold on. Nigga, am I lagging?
You said, what view do I hold when it comes to semantic externalism?
You lagging or is that me?
I just hold my own view, nigga. I don't know. Hey, you said, what about Smooth
What's
Flow?
your,
But that nigga was good.
alright, nigga, what's your view on, bro? Nigga, what was your, alright, what's your view on
No,
theism, bro?
he wasn't tracking to the end, but it was like, yeah, I can say God best explains contingency. Yes, we do, but hold on, I was bringing up. We started talking about truth for some reason and logic, and he just wasn't tracking that. And then I don't even know how the judges said it was. The judge said that Smoothie didn't respond, but then he said it was income. That nigga was fucking retarded. I don't know who it was. I forgot.
Alright, nigga.
No.
Alright, nigga, okay, I don't care about that.
Fuck.
Okay, so your view on theism is what, bro?
God best explains contingency.
He best explains it. Nigga, just, okay. Uh, do you hold the presumption or the presupposition that it are contingent facts, or are you open to discussion about this type of talk?
But what?
Yeah, there are these type of contingent things. Because if
There are
it
contingent.
presumes there are, yeah, I mean, if it presumes like, there are contingent things, these type of explanations, I wouldn't talk about that. But if you are open to those type of conversations within that topic, then sure, yeah, we could talk about that.
Mm-hmm. So the argument itself doesn't presuppose contingency actually exists. It's just saying what will be the case given the conception. But I can't commit myself to saying contingent things exist plausibly.
Okay. And he just best what type of explanation?
Bro, we got a debate, bro. Like, you quizzing me my whole
Yeah,
view,
I'm
nigga. I'm
saying,
debating
nigga,
it. Like,
yeah,
nigga crazy as shit.
nigga, we can the debate, nigga. That would just be the first
You
person.
trying to know my whole epistemology.
Nigga,
I bet, set it up.
bro. Okay, bro. Oh my god, this nigga's about to ping this shit. Okay, bro. I'm just gonna side eye wavy, dumbass.
Yo, Flo, peep general, my nigga. Peep
On
general.
God, this nigga used the lube. We seen in this shit so deep in the meta. I don't give a fuck, bro.
That's scribbled versus typical, my nigga. Watch that in your free. Yo, watch that in your free time, my nigga. That's scribble versus typical. I don't got your DMs on this account, bro. Forward that shit to a group chat you're in or something.
Bro, how the fuck do you save those type of audios on Discord, bro?
You got them niggas pinned or something, gay ass?
I'm got a headache, bro.
Alright, Mark, do you want to have a judge or do you just want direct?
Damn, nigga, turn your mic.
Bro,
Oh, yo, my fault. Hold on.
The one conversation we had at the GC, bro, again, like, if this should get too extreme, nigga, I'm requesting moderation. I don't got my PC on me. This nigga mic mods, but it's
We
okay.
can just have talk.
Sure, nigga. But,
I bet how much time.
nigga, we could just do like a minute 30 or two.
Alright, let's do like 2 minutes.
That's fine. What do you want to moderate? We could have someone like probably on PC, but I mean, whatever.
I mean, I can do it again. Hold on, wait. Let me open this.
Wait, just speak your voice.
And the topic here is that God just best explains contingency.
Yeah, a recording. So who's gonna like? You want?
We got polar, yeah, we got polar mod. Do you want to do opening statements? We're just doing post. We're just doing press rec, bro. We're just doing post.
The judge can either be flow or we're just doing rec. It doesn't really.
Yeah, we could just do rec, but I don't really idiot judgment.
I bet. So let me know when somebody starts the time. You can mute that nigga so I can talk and I can see my time if I have enough.
Oh, yeah, I'll have the timer. Hold on. I'll just have the timer on my phone and I'll mute y'all niggas on my PC. Hold on. Let me go to my fucking clock. How many, what's the time for
It's 2
It's 2 minutes.
2 minutes? Oh,
That
they
shit
put that shit
disappeared.
in debate Rex. All right. Your time starts as soon as I'm you.
I bet. So we can just say that God best explains contingency. We can say God to be a being who can't fail to attain and who is rational and has causal power. So it's the case that explanation just means a virtuous reason for a thing's existence, or at least why it would exist if it did exist. We can say God's going to be virtuous because it's parsimonious and unified, as there's one being in which all contingent things will be caused by. We can say that when it comes to infinite regress and brute contingency, one of them does not even posit an explanation. It's not even a candidate. When it comes to the infinite regress, it's going to be an infinite chain or presuppositions in which the antecedent is going to be contingent itself. And also, the reason why the contingent things even derive from the antecedent is going to be unclear there. Less explanatory and less virtuous. Thus is the case that God is the best explanation. The valid inference can just be a disjunctive syllogism. So off of that, I mean, you can go ahead and respond. I'm not going to do.
Okay, so there's like two problems that I quoted. Look, one is to think about unification. Like if you were to say, for example, right? Let's say we have like a contingent thing X, for example. The type of explanation one that you were given, it seems like you're talking about a counterfactual notion. I'd actually disagree with the counterfactual type of explanation or explanatory clause there. I would kind of need motivation there because like I don't even like think when we do these conceptual talks, maybe about what exists, maybe about the type of things that do exist, the production there is counterfactual, or that we have these counterfactual productions in which are virtuous, right? Conceptually at least. And that just goes to say we analyze the type of conceptual units that abides there, that is just not the type of thing in which we say there's these entailments maybe that are epistemically virtuous, ontologically virtuous, or metaphysically virtuous. But and then I just need the type of talk there on the unification clarified. I don't even know what you really mean by that. Then I just need an argument for P1. Presumably, you said it's a disjunctive syllogism. I need an argument for P1.
Yeah, so it's not a formal syllogism. I gave the inference rule just in case you want to check my logic. I'm pretty sure when you say premise one, it's just me saying God is the best explanation, then defining what I meant by explanation. That's the very first thing that I said. So I'm not sure what you're referring to when you say you want an argument. I already mentioned why it follows that not only is my argument valid, but also sound, be the explanation I gave of the premises, which is going to be analyticity. So I'm not sure where that comes from. You did mention I have two problems. Well, first of all, I don't know what problem really aims to demarcate there, right? Why is it the case that I must respond to these things? Otherwise, my position fails. I want you to argue for that. Then tell me why it's the case the argument is going to be sound. Now, you talked about counterfactuals in respects to how I cash out contingency. You can disagree with it, but I'm not even sure how that has bearing on the conversation. But when it comes to the counterfactual type of talks, you do realize you're being conceptual here, right? I'm not saying it's the case that God for sure causes contingency. I'm just saying if he were to cause contingency, it's going to be the most virtuous explanation. So that's the mistrack on you. And then when it comes to you talking about how production isn't counterfactual or conceptually virtuous, you do understand the point of conceptual ethics and engineering is to just make sure that we're, for example, not sneaking in our conclusion into our concepts themselves, right? But it's the case that I only said that God has causal power. I didn't say that be his own type of nature. It's the case that without an argument, he would best explain things in general. I never said that. So I don't know why that's in question there. And when it comes to unification talk, I already told you what that meant. It's the case that all contingent things will flow through him if it's the case that he does exist because of the causal power, right? And causality itself can be counterfactual, yes, which you seem to disagree with. Well, I need the argument for why that's justified there. Because again, it's just conceptual. It's not really a propositional thing in real life such that you must hold to what I'm saying over everything else that exists. It's just via my own framework.
Okay, yeah. So you kind of misunderstood the conceptual talk there I was bringing up. If he wanted to, maybe someone, I don't think I would repeat that shit. I'm not gonna lie, but He misread that completely. And then like when he talked about the arguments and soundness, look, presumably you're embedding the type of truth that follows from soundness. I need to know what the idea and the theory of truth there that's being deployed there. And when you like ask me for these sub arguments, maybe for the the claims, for example, what's meant there by argument? Because it seems like there was a distinction between justification, motivation, reason, those type of things that are not synonymous with argument. So I need you to be clear on what you mean by argument there. And you said you just gave right the inference rule just to say your logic is, valid, it follows, right? And I'm just taking the formal version there, what I mean by, what's the argument for P1. And you brought up analyticity. I actually disagree. I could say something like there's a disconnect between how we have, let's say this conceptual talk, maybe conceptual item, right? Conceptual item one, and then we could say the conceptual item is token, right? Which is, going to be the formation there when you talk about, God's the best explanation for X, Y, Z, right? But your statement just holds the if there. I'm not talking about the token version. I'm obviously just talking about the conceptual item. We're talking prior to being token. And then like the thing about the unification, I don't know why whole thing is being unified. You asked for justification without a theory. I hold that these things kind of would be malformed, right? Because it has no standing. We don't even know what justification means there. That would be vacuous. You asked me why do, what's the argument or the justification for these things being normative, or why you ought or have these obligations. I could just say it's a virtue of the theory of obligation I hold to here, right? And then like you just said a lot of things that were unmotivated, which I would need arguments for. But yeah.
I bet. First of all, he says it's going to be in virtue of your obligation theory. Obviously, you want an argument for that. So obviously, if you can't argue for that particular thing being that which we hold to here, I'm just dismissing everything we said. So I need a sound argument for that. When we say argument, obviously, is a conventional form just of premises which support a conclusion or until a conclusion is truth. And when it comes to justification itself, you want to argue for why you're justified. Even though simpliciter, these concepts are different, we still argue for them in general. So it doesn't even matter there. I don't know why you said that. You said you're going to hold to them being malformed or my justification taught being malformed because you don't know what it means. I don't grant that's actually justified there. And if I'm going circular, I don't grant it to be a vicious thing. But also, when I say justified, I talk about epistemic normativity, right? What allows you to say these particular things? And what are your acceptability conditions? That's what I'm investigating here. So that's what that means. You talked about me misunderstanding the conceptual talk. You literally mentioned virtues in respects to concepts themselves. That is conceptual ethics and conceptual engineering. The person mistracking is you, not me. I don't know why you said that. You said I'm embedding that truth follows from soundness? No, what the fuck? Soundness itself is constituted by validity and true premises there. And my theory of truth in this particular conversation is you not defeating what I'm saying. The true justified defeater that entails that my argument cannot go through. That's what I mean. But also, it's also going to be in virtue of my explanation of the analyticity there, right? And then you talked about the token stuff. I don't know if that distinction actually exists. I don't know what conceptual framework you're deploying to make that kind of claim when you justify that. And then we talked about how it's the case that there's going to be disconnect between the concept and this token, which is formation or something like that, right? Well, I don't even know if that's true. And if that's the case, why is that thing that I must motivate or justify with the argument for that type of talk as well? And also, when it comes to the concept itself, I don't grant this distinction. When I make a conception itself, it's a stipulation of what I think or what I want to demonstrate, demarcate in the conversation. It's not a particular thing I'm picking out from some other type of source. It's my epistemology. So it's going to be a stipulation there. Thus, there's no distinction that you're talking about, or at least in your sense. So I'm not sure why you said that at all. I think aside from that, you can just go ahead. I mean, you can respond again if you.
Yeah, I think after this we might be able to go to conclusions. But look, so the problem that I've introduced here is that we're pretty much just doing this thing where you're just presuming these things to be the case, right? Without actual arguments, right? And we can share a similar notion of argument, that's fine. But the whole thing I'm disagreeing with is the conceptual deployment of these items, right? And you said, well, I don't know what conceptual framework you're going under. That doesn't really matter at all. You could have the descriptions independent, or my bad, analysis slash descriptions independent of a framework there. So look, I don't know why you bring that. That's obviously non-relevant. But look, so you added a few things. One, you added in this thing that would be presumably your argumentation framework and your theory of truth, right? Those things need to be, given motivation. I actually take this type of motivation. It literally just appeals to the psychological norms. You could just reduce, what what's motivation to what's preferable to the psychological norms, and then you just categorize it depending on the domain. Maybe like propositionally, so like you'll say whatever you're, motivated to, or pull towards propositionally. That's the type of thing that's going to be motivated. And you could just say that's subjective. So when obviously the person's asking is going to be the primary user, I could just take it's that's dysfunctional in your account. But look, when we talk about, let's say, for example, justification, the type of thing there is you're embedding is these normative guiding questions, or well, why should we, hold to X, Y, Z, right? Why is it justified? Obviously that's not normative right there, but why should we hold XYZ? Look, you're positing this idea of normativity without actually arguing for it. You're just assuming it within the dialect, and you're embedding these concepts and pulling other concepts to it to follow from these argumentative entailments, right? Which would probably also embed the argumentation frameworks that are being deployed there that you derive these, virtues or these entailments from, right? So the thing that you've been doing in the debate this entire time is presuming things to be the case without strong justification, arguments, or motivations, right? And those are on my side. And there is that to give my analysis of what it means, right? And then you're going to be asking me some type of more robust question. And then the inquiries, there's going to be a question at the foundational level, right? Is your inquiry useful? Is your inquiry one which needs
Yo,
to be
2 minutes up, gang.
those
Yo,
type
2
of
minutes
questions?
up, gang. Yo, 2 minutes up.
You couldn't meet me. Go ahead.
All right, but I forgot to mention you said a lot on motivated. So first of all, what is your conception of motivation? I believe you said it reduced towards subjectivity in general, but still those things must be rational in nature. So again, I need some kind of argument justification, but your theory being adopted to in this conversation. Also, I put a burden on you at the start about a particular thing which you didn't respond to. I mean, that's pretty fine. I think anyone watching the rec can see that. But regardless, you mentioned how it's the case I'm presuming these things without actual argument. I want the argument for that. And also, I'm not sure why it's the case that I must argue for these particular things. I think what we can do is demonstrate how it's the case that, for example, we're doing is going to be virtuous or coherent or warranted, but having an argument simpliciter in a formal sense for these things does not need to be done, at least when it comes to things that you're talking about. So I don't know why you said that. You talked about how we can have an analysis independent of a framework. Okay, that's the case, but you disagree with the conceptual deployment has to be justified, right? What is the rationale behind your motivation that actually warrants your position? That's what I want. You mentioned my argumentative framework being deployed there. Well, yeah, just about testing claims and investigating them such that is it the case that it's coherence? Do things follow, for example? That's pretty much it. I don't know why I have to argue for that or prove that. I want you to justify that. When it comes to you talking about how it's the case that these things reduced for motivation can be subjective, again, this can tie to my rationale point. You said it's the case that I'm positing this normative thing in regards to justification. Well, standard, typically justification itself is some kind of normative thing, right? It's the case that we can say something given the reason that exists. So I'm not sure why you're dismissing that. What is the argument for that there? Why is that being posited? And also, when it comes to me assuming these things, I don't know why it's vicious. Even if it's vicious, I want you to argue it's the case that the entailment there being made is that my position cannot obtain. I want you to argue for that. You're assuming a lot of things and not me, and going off of your type of deployment, these things we're going to host in the conversation. But I don't get that at all. And then you said that it's the case that there's no motivation for my argument. I think I already addressed this with your account. And I don't know why it's the case your analysis itself is going to be accurate here. Right? Why is it virtuous? Why is it coherent? Why is it warranted? And best of all, why does it explain the data itself, given the conversation? I don't think you just analyze something, something follows. What's the argument for that? And also, I'm not sure what the theory you're positing there. What's the undercut or rebuttal towards my position? And how do you know it's the case that that thing actually occurs there? Give me your conception or argumentation. And I want to know why it's the case that the feed actually entails in my... Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Wait, Mark. Let me restart your timer real quick. Hold on. Let me restart your shit.
Let me restart it. Look, so the type of thing that Ernest has done in this debate is again just presume frameworks for actual arguments, right? And then he asked the question, oh well, why why do these things need to be argued for? Well, presumably you're also invoking some type of modal verbiage or modal auxiliary there, and I would actually disagree with that on a fundamental level, right? Look, I would need a argument and motivation there for that. And question circularity and vicious circularity in which one cannot obtain or one argument cannot obtain. Look, I actually disagree with that type of adequacy theory, right, being deployed. And the metastabilizers that personify the language there can even exemplify some type of, congruent response, some type of dialectic obligation, some type of norms, right? The type of things you've been doing, again, is just having these virtues from this argumentation framework that's just been privated. You haven't displayed arguments, motivation, or even displayed it in itself, right? And that's been the core heat of the conversation. That's what I've been attacking. And also, I want to be clear. The inquiry on the burdens, again, look, you're going to say that, well, presumably these are the type of things that you're going to want to answer, that's going to have entailments if you don't answer. And, the type of things that are going to be superfluous, not superfluous, pragmatic if you do answer. The type of add-on conditions that you take from the base notion of burdens or inquiries is what's also being questioned, right? Obviously on your side of, the debate. But look, and when you're inquiring and then asking for justification or these type of burdens on my end, and, you're asking, all these type of superfluous questions, this is needing to be argued for, right? And obviously, we could disagree at the fundamental level of the deployment of the argumentation theory that warrants that type of claim, right? But that's not going to do anything here because I would just take the primary hierarchical type notion. I go to say, well, the interlocutor who asked number one, for example, is the primary, which would, instantiate these type of commitments. Would it go to say, well, they take their type of semantics, they adopt their type of commitments, XYZ, right? And then we could take it out on a robust account and just deflate your type of argumentation schemes and norms, right? Which are the things that's going to be embedded and coming through. Also, look, also on your type of argumentation framework, I need a argument or even motivation on why we even construct it like this, right? Or why we'd add it in this type of way, et cetera, et cetera. This is just attacking the construction of your argumentation framework at the fundamental level and the object level.
Your time up, son. Your time up. Your time up. Let me unmute this nigga.
I bet. So when it comes to attack, so when it comes to attack, I'm going to question, are you good? Yeah, so when it comes to attacking, I'm going to question your conception. Why is it going to be ethical in this engineering such that it can be virtuous, coherent, or warranted, and can apply to the conversation itself, even motivated that? And even if that's the case, why is it entailed that what you're doing is an attack? What's the argument for that? And then you also said before, why is my inquiry motivated? I already answered this, is to investigate your type of view. You don't hold to non-falsifiable claims because I can derive productive from that, which you don't want, smoothly speaking. He's saying I'm presuming frameworks without arguments. I know that, but I put that into question, not responding. And also, when it comes to my questions and burdens themselves, they can function independent of my scheme itself. So if it's a case they want me to justify my scheme to place those things, it's not necessary. But you said it's not actually follow. I don't know why you said that. You said it's a case that we disagree with the adequacy of my type of modal verbiage. Okay, what's the argument for that? And why is that going to be warranted to justify given the conversation? You said it's the case that I haven't displayed the argument's motivation. Again, I question that conception there again earlier before, which did not respond to. And also, I'm not sure why it's the case that I must motivate it. But also, I did respond to that. I told you why it's the case I assume this type of framework, and you didn't respond to that or retract that at all. You said that it's the case that things are being questioned. I'm asking these things to be argued for. When it comes to my burdens themselves, again, that's what's in question. Why is the case that that must occur? And when it comes to the modal talk itself, you said it's the case that, for example, you take some kind of hierarchy towards things we're talking about, where it's like interlocking with the primary person who speaks. The guy who speaks first is going to, for example, place the burden on the other person or have the burden to demonstrate the props to be true. I don't really agree with that. Why is that the case? And was that necessary? You said that you can take a robust account, deflate my schemes and norms. Nope, I don't grant that at all. I'm with the argument for that. When it comes to the construction talk, again, that this is a stipulation itself, given the argument. I don't have to really motivate that, right? What it must motivate is me using it here, for example. I already did that. And I question your conception again. Like, I don't think anything you're saying really tracks what I'm saying. And then, what else did you say? I don't think you said anything else, not gonna lie. You say we disagree with the warrant itself. Okay, yeah. So if we disagree with the warrant itself, that just means under my conception, what you're saying is not going to be warranted. Thus, I'm dismissing it. You don't want to posit that. You want to say it's the case that we must, for example, adopt the same warrants here and then have your type of conceptual framework.
All right, your time up. Your time up.
That's going to be vicious towards your view.
I think he misstruck a lot of my points, and his responses wasn't actually asymmetric. So, I mean, I feel like we can kind of go to conclusions there. I mean, well, let me actually see. Give me 1 sec.
You're not going to respond again? You just want to go to...
Yeah, I could go to conclusions. I think I'm fine to go to conclusions right there.
All right, my nigga. You just spent 16 seconds to not say anything, but I'm gonna stop the timer. I'm gonna restart the shit. Do y'all hold on? Let me unmute Ernest. What y'all want the closers to look like? A minute, 2 minutes? What's going on there?
You could give us closers real quick.
Ernest, how long you want on your close?
We could just do it 2 minutes, like the responses was.
Do 2 minutes. He can go first because I just started. Or sorry, it's ended my turn. So it's
all right, bet.
Okay, hold on. Wait, give me 1 sec then.
As soon as you say go, I'll start your timer.
I gotta feed my dogs real quick. But look, yeah, go, I guess. So the start of the conversation, it didn't really get too, deep into meta. I was just, having these useful inquiries on my end of the dialect on, why we, should hold to Ernest's position, the arguments for it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Then it just got into meta, which globalified and quantified overall relevant domains that was being talked about in the first half of the conversation. So I think that's the most relevant. I'll go over it. Look, so he kept asking these burdens, inquiries, and supposing these type of things, embedding it to different frameworks. He was just doing, the useful tactical, oh, I could hold to XYZ, what motivates this? And that obviously got defeated because it would be in question, right? In the type of talks there, he asked, inquired on why versus circularity, or any type of circularity, or one which the argument cannot obtain, or the hypothesis cannot obtain. Right? I already questioned him on that type of notions of obtain. I don't know why that's an adequate criteria we even hold to. And even if it was, what's the meta stabilizer there that makes it, even talk intelligible, or any type of synonyms like that? He didn't answer these type of questions. I talked, I attacked the conceptual talk at the start, and then we even moved further into me attacking his, framework of inquiry, his theory of argumentation, his theory of truth, how he, constructs arguments, responses, burdens, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the type of things he was just doing was intrinsically just utilizing the things that's been in question, right? And when his response was to the circularity point, got attacked, he just never responded there, which was his only safe, point. And then later in the conversation, Ernest kind of does this thing where he tries to mimic my view, but he just doesn't track it, right? I actually disagree with the modal talk, right? And he embedded it in his later responses, right? Which obviously doesn't go through given, even the mutual attack relation and argumentation frameworks, right? And then he tried to say these things can be constructed independent, right? But that's the whole thing. I disagree with individuation at the start of the conversation, which he never attacked at all. And most of the burdens was primary on his side of the dialect. I told him that my argumentation framework allows me, to do these type of things, which deploys burdens on his side, which could still be allowed to function on my side. And then he tried to, add reductios. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Oh, holy fuck this.
Restart the shit. All right, 3, 2, 1.
Yeah, so the first thing I gave was the sound argument for why what I'm saying obtains. He tried to question my theory of argument, my theory of truth and justification, etc., etc. I questioned his conceptions of these things such that why is it the case I must justify these particular things. He just tried to say, I believe, for example, just reduces towards subjectivity, such that under his account, he wants to place these burdens, but I don't have to grant that, right? But then he said for himself, he conceded, we disagree on the warrant, right? Warrants is why a thing must be adopted. If it's the case that your warrant is not established given my conversation conception itself, I can just dismiss it. That was a reductio. So nothing you said even obtains. Everything seems going to be private there, not applying to my argument itself. It's only towards your conception, not my conception. That's a conception on your part. And then he talked about how it's the case I'm being circular, and I mentioned the viciousness part. Well, for example, the entailment part was not about the viciousness itself. I was saying vicious such that it's the case that entailed argument cannot go through. Because obviously my goal in this conversation is to present my argument and have it be sound. So presumably you want to attack the soundness of the argument and not argue about random things. So that's my framework right there, which I already told you in the start of the conversation. And then the entailment talk itself, the vicious talk itself, that was me saying, why can't I, for example, just be circular in some manner, but not have it be vicious, right? And again, you didn't respond to that. Because literally I went circular in the conversation and I mentioned it's the case I'm not being vicious there. You didn't respond to that. You thought it was the case I was talking about the entailment relation in regards to the viciousness itself, but I wasn't. Not simplicity, that's a mistake on your part. And then we talked about conceptual talk. You mentioned virtues in regards to concepts, for example. And then Ali told you what conceptual ethics and engineering are, which you didn't respond to, right? I told you I'm going to be virtuous here, and I'm considering themselves are just going to be stipulations. Even when I'm talking about what I'm trying to think of or the marketing conversation, you didn't respond to that. And then also, again, I question your conception of attacks and motivation, why we should hold to them, how they're explanatory given the conversation, how they can even apply to this conversation. And again, you didn't really respond to that. And then for your whole reduction thing, talking about subjectivism, right? I agree with things being subjective, but it's the case it must be rational still. So even in the case of being subjective there, what's the rationale behind your subjectivity? Why we should adopt them, right? Why can they attract the conversation, reliably speaking, and apply onto me? That was in question. No response towards that. Right, I don't know why.
2 minutes up.
Already?
Yeah, I swear to God.
Yo, I'm not going to. Okay. Wait, there was wrecking here, right?
Oh, yeah, there was 2 rec bots. Let me end
here.
Yo, make the polls and also give me